This is the UR Business Network.
Welcome to the New York Real Estate Journal radio show. I'm Rick Kaplan with my co-host Eric Wilson, and the show is brought to you today by the New York Real Estate Journal, bringing together the commercial real estate industry for over 25 years. Find us at NYREJ.com. If you'd like to be a guest or sponsor for the show, call 800-654-4993 or email us at radio@nyrej.com. Again, that's 800-654-4993 or email us at radio@nyrej.com. And today we have, for an interview, we have on the phone with us Shlomo Chopp. He's the managing partner at Case Property Services, LLC. Good morning, Shlomo.
Good morning, Rick. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you for being on the show. So tell us a little bit about Case Property Services and what it does.
Well, Case Property Services was formed back in 2008 to address a specific need, unfortunately, in the market right now, and that was that the market has declined. The market did decline after our CMBS bubble, and many borrowers were left with properties that were not performing, and they had one or two choices: either come out of pocket and pay a mortgage personally, even though it was a non-recourse loan, or go and talk to the lender. The challenge was that there were two types of people who knew how to talk to the lender. There was someone that did deals during the RTC days where they figured the lender will just, give them whatever they want. And if not, well, let the lender take the property because who wants this property? And then there were those who basically said yes to the lender, whatever they got, and ultimately couldn't close the deal once they had a deal on the table. So we addressed this need in the market and said there has to be a smarter way, a better way to deal with this. So using our knowledge of some of these complex financing structures and also our knowledge of commercial real estate and operating commercial real estate, and put together a strategic approach to actually solving these problems that benefit not only the borrowers but the lenders as well.
So you worked with both parties on this.
Well, I end up being a go-between. I say we bridge the gap between the two of them, but we usually represent the borrowers, and the reason for that is that the lenders have infrastructure in place. Whether they're optimized to achieve the best result is something that's been debated many times. But we do represent borrowers who don't otherwise believe that they have such a type of infrastructure in place. And even those that believe they have an infrastructure in place, but realize after one negotiation that they were out of the depth, unfortunately.
So in the past 4 or 5 years, you must have been very busy because of all the the recession, pretty much.
Yeah, we've been extremely busy. We've done a significant amount of deals, both dollar size and deal count as well. And it was interesting because there was this acceptance from borrowers where, they had a problem with their lender, and borrowers always dealt directly with their lender when it came to post-closing. And borrowers had to be convinced and explained to that this isn't your local bank where you could walk in and say, hey, Joe, I know you for 20 years, you made this loan. And, let's go and discuss the issues and let's see how we can work it out. Borrowers had to realize after a while that these are no longer conventional loans. These are securities with many layers of parties, sometimes internally conflicted. And you needed to hire somebody who actually not only understood how to deal with them from a property perspective, but understood the various reams of paper that get wasted in creating some of these documents that's created these CMBS loans. So once borrowers have adopted, it sort of became an upward bell curve where, the upward on the bell curve, which I think now we're declining somewhat because a lot of the bad loans have been resolved. And it really picked up. And we're still seeing a lot of volume because we're seeing a lot of borrowers who have issues that are coming now to fruition where leases that were perhaps done in 2015, 2014, 2015 at high rental rates where these tenants that had 10-year leases are now starting to expire, are not willing to renew at those ridiculously high rates, and they want TI packages, leasing packages, in exchange for those lower rates. And with maturities coming up in 2016, 2017 for the 2006 and 2007 vintage loans, it's sort of where, okay, I'm coming out of pocket every month for $10,000, not a big deal, but that $2-3 million has ended a rainbow in 2016, 2017, calls into question any dollars I put in monthly or put in order to retain tenants at a lower rate than they're in there today.
So basically, they're looking at the cap rate of what the property is at the time that the financing is going to go through.
Well, it's a combination of cap rate and also coverage ratio. So when a lender makes a loan initially, a lender says, well, it used to be they almost always looked at two things. They looked at the LTV, the loan to value, and they also looked at the cash flow and how much property could support cash flow wise. So if you had tenants that paid a higher rent, you'd be able to support a higher loan because the mortgage would be able to be supported by some of the higher rents. Essentially, if I had a tenant paying $30, I could take more of that money towards my mortgage than if I had a tenant paying $20 because my expenses are usually going to stay fixed. However, what's happening now is not only do they look at it from a cash flow perspective and LTV, but lenders are also looking at it from almost a cap rate perspective. They're saying my loan on this property to this borrower, what does it represent in the way of a cap rate? And what's happening is that lenders are doing a 10 cap or 9 cap on net operating income to arrive at the loan amount. I'm talking about CMBS lenders in particular. And as the rents go down, the value goes down, and that affects LTVs, which, again, we could talk about how these appraisals come to be, but that affects LTVs, but it certainly affects this cap rate, which is called debt yield. And therefore, many loans that are otherwise losing a little money find themselves with a big gap between the amount they could refinance for and the amount they have to pay off on their existing loan.
Shlomo, with the lending market being so hot right now, and it seems like everyone's throwing money out there with construction going on, especially in New York, right down there in Manhattan, are we looking at in a bubble? Is this going to be the same thing we had in the downturn back in 2008?
It's very hard to tell right now. And there was a recent article about they basically said that we don't know what's happening essentially. And here's what's happening in my eyes. After everything declined in 2008, lenders started making loans in 2009, 2010, and initially they'll only give it to you if you put up your firstborn, perhaps a finger or two, right. And otherwise you didn't get it. So credit was tight. You had to be superb credit to get a loan. Then as things went on, 2011, 2012, all of a sudden you only had to put up your secondborn and one finger. So eventually, credit underwriting standards went down. Doesn't mean it declined below where it should be, but it declined. Now, the challenge that people have is that you take a look at it declining, and it hasn't stopped declining. And because no one has put in place some guidelines or some, the rating agencies like commenting, and they're not wrong on certain loans, saying, hey, this is a risky loan, and commenting based on what's put out there. But I've yet to see some proactivity, where they go ahead and say, well, here's where the line should be drawn. And because no one knows where the line is drawn, we're very scared that we're going to go over that line. So you have many professionals saying, or many pundits in the media and many rating agencies saying, oh, my gosh, you did an interest-only loan for 5 years. I can't believe you did a full interest-only loan. Or them saying, oh, wow, you over-leveraged this because you gave him what we believe to be a 90% LTV because your cap rate was too aggressive and our cap rate is less aggressive. But ultimately, no one's telling the bankers, meaning not the rating agencies, not the ultimate buyers of the loans. No one has said, here's what the standard should be. And because no one knows what the line is, we're just afraid we might have crossed it or are going to cross it. So what I can say based on whether we're in a bubble or not, from what I've seen, I haven't seen too many bad loans being made. But where we're going to end up, I don't know. I think everything is motivated by, well, some people like calling it greed. I call it the guy who's originating the loan is making decisions on the loan. That was never the case until recently, where you had an originator sitting on committee or someone on committee originating the loan. So I don't know. It's yet to be seen. And it requires a lot of work and a lot of cooperation and buy-in from lenders to be able to create some sort of standard.
Now, Shlomo, let me ask you a two-part question. First is, are there other people out there that would be doing this type of almost mediating between the bank and the borrower? And what do you do that makes it resolves the issue that they're having between the two?
Okay. The answer to the question is like this. Yes, there are others in the space. There are others who go between the borrower and the lender. There are others who specialize in the CMBS sector, which is where we specialize as well. That being said, there are two ways to approach a matter. There is the we'll go and approach a lender and we'll talk to the lender and we know what they're thinking somewhat, but we're going to go in and we'll talk to them. We'll try to explain to them. We'll use your financials, Mr. Borrower. We'll use your financials. We'll go and we'll negotiate. I mean, that's really what it is. Here, look, it's not covering its debt service, not making money. You have a loan on it. You don't really want it back, although you really, you would take it back, I guess. Mm-hmm. Let's do a deal. That's one approach. And that approach, I guess from a batting average perspective, it will look good, but otherwise, it doesn't do the process justice. Because why are you different than the borrower? Yes, some more intricacies about the CMBS process, and some things that the lender has done, but ultimately, the lender and the borrower, if they work together cooperatively, they could reach some sort of offer, which is what you'd get because you're not really doing anything too much different. Yes, there's an education curve, but the difference between you representing the borrower and the borrower going on his own is the difference isn't that great. Initially, when we started this business and we took the approach, that's the initial approach that we took back in 2008. And we know the intricacies, and we know what's called a pooling and servicing agreement, which is a big, thick document, and how it fluctuates from loan to loan and the various clauses in a loan, the various pitfalls. But we recognize the issue that I just mentioned, mm-hmm. And what we decided to do is come up with a strategy and say, okay, there are too many loans out there that the lenders are foreclosing on that they should not be foreclosing on, and the proof is in the pudding. The proof is it sells for less than it's appraised for, meaning when the lender assesses a property, let's take it back, they do an appraisal, and then when it comes time to actually dispose of that loan, they end up getting less money, and it costs them money to hold it in between. That's a problem for the lender. Furthermore, there are documented instances that at least I know of where the borrower made an offer and the lender ultimately recovered less. Okay? So the question is, if the lender's recovering less and the borrower's ready to pay more, why aren't there more deals done? And what we did was we came up with a very comprehensive strategy that didn't focus as much on the loan and on the borrower and on the lender as much as it focused on the property. Okay? We actually, before we even approach a lender, we do a comprehensive study of the property. We come up with a significant business plan that the borrower can believe in. Because when you go to the lender and say, I want to work out a loan, they say, well, what are you going to do? Right? What, are we just going to give you a rate reduction or a partial principal reduction? And okay, then what? Who says you're not back in a couple of months, right? So what we did was we now come up with, together with our borrower, who understands this property better than anyone else, we come up with a comprehensive business plan that not only could the lender buy into, but the borrower can buy into and makes sense for the property moving forward. We then address each of the issues that a lender usually has with a workout. The borrower wants a workout without putting in any additional money. The borrower is aggressive with the lender and wants the lender to work on his timeline, even though the lender is a bunch of red tape. There are many different issues, and we address those. Then we look at how the lender comes up with their value, and we work to make sure that our value is in line with the lender's value. And if the lender gets a different value, we have enough proof to show the lender that that value is wrong and our value is right. Not because we said so, and not because, well, if you don't believe me, just take the property. Because at the end of the day, the guys that say that, they call me 2 days before an auction. They say, Shlomo, there's this property. I have this property. It's going to auction in 3 days. Do you know the guys at this special servicer? Can you please give them a call, see if they could do anything? That's a little late to the party.
Right.
So what we advise our clients is the second you see your property starting to decline income-wise, and it's a decline that will last, you need to call us. We need to see if there's a way to resolve the problem, because it's a property-level problem, and it won't be resolved without fixing the property. And if you have a loan that's too high, you can't afford to put in the money into the property to fix the property level problem, which means you need to make some room in the capital stack, so to speak. And that's what we specialize in. We specialize in reducing losses and creating sustainable business plans going forward. And, oh, by the way, we understand the special servicing industry, the CMBS industry, and we understand what it takes to make a deal.
So you have a property that the bank is either, at that point, are they calling in the loan ready to foreclose because there were no payments made for 3-4 months? Is that when you would step in to the negotiation? Or the landlord's, would the landlord call you when he thinks he might have a potential problem going forward?
Well, there are those who call us when they have a problem and it's in default, and we always wish that they'd call us prior. And here's why. Unlike what many borrowers and owners think, you can talk to the lender to restructure your property or loan even without defaulting. Common sense is, and common assumption in the market is, that you must default to put pressure on the lender, and then the lender won't talk to you until you default. That's absolute fallacy.
Yeah, see, I've always heard that as well.
Listen, the lender certainly doesn't take away from that misconception. The lender tries to make you believe that as well, and it's a very simple equation. If I'm the lender and I have one of two jobs, my job is to solve problems. The special servicer solves problems. That's what he does. He has no other job within the CMBS trust other than solving problems and, I guess, approving leases and approving transfers. But if I have the following options, either come to a deal with the borrower or foreclose, right? I'd always prefer that the guys in defaults like that, I could force whatever deal I want on him, or else we'll just foreclose. It's called dual tracking. That's the language that the special services use. However, if you're not in default, the special servicer will not foreclose on you. So what we do, we suggest to our clients, is out of good faith and also out of good business, not to default so long as there are discussions going on. And many times we've had special services tell us that the reason we were able to push through the deal is because the committee said, well, hey, this guy's a good guy. This guy has continued to make his mortgage payments even though the property is not covered, and let's do this deal with him because he's an honorable person because he agreed to the loan, he's paying the loan. So
wait, Shlomo,
they should be the borrowers.
Shlomo, what bank have you dealt with where they say, oh, no, he's a good guy? I haven't heard a bank say that.
I'll say, you'd be surprised. The CMBS lenders, when they go through committee, if you did something bad, now there are different levels of bad. There's a bad called bad boy carve-outs that triggers recourse on a loan. But if you basically were dishonest with the special servicing asset manager, or were not straight with him, you're not going to get a deal through committee, because when they sit in committee, they're going to look at each other and say, this guy, forget it. We're not doing a deal with this guy. We're just going to take his property and have a good day.
Right.
But the fact is that everyone thinks that these special servicing asset managers are awful people. They're not. They're regular guys like you and I. They're just trying to protect their position. Mm-hmm. And they need someone to come to them and say, hey, here's what we're prepared to do, because you know what? They got so many deals on their plate, and they got so much work. They don't have the time or the resources to do the type of due diligence and to point out the finer points of the property as the borrower can, because the borrower's lived it for the past few years. So if you can put your best foot forward and illustrate a genuine desire to keep to your loan documents, however, it's just financially not feasible, but you have a business plan to maximize value and you want the lender to buy into it, they'll work with you and they will respect and accept the fact that you're being a good guy, so to speak. And you'd be surprised, but I've heard it over and over again, and the lender's the boogeyman, but they're not. They're just regular guys like you and I.
So let me ask you a question, Shlomo. You said the property is really what your client is. So do you get called in only by borrowers, or do sometimes lenders call you in to kind of resolve these type of situations?
The lenders do not call us to resolve these situations. And the lenders, I think, should primarily look at this from a property perspective, mm-hmm. and they have personnel in-house that could deal with the restructuring side. That being said, we would tremendously benefit a lender who would ask us to work with them. Mm. And the reason for that is because it's about coming up with a strategy on the real estate side that fits the loan side. And the problem is that you're either or. You're not both. We're not both. We act as a conduit between the either and the or, and that's why we could be successful.
Right.
So the average Joe or the average property owner,
real estate professional, Rick.
Real estate professional.
Right, thank you.
A borrower, they aren't going to call the bank and do this on their own, because that's where the bank gets the bad reputation, where they're not nice guys. Because they really don't, they can't deal with the borrower on that level, because the borrower doesn't really have the facts that they know, that the bank really knows they need. Correct?
That is accurate. And just to expand on what you said, what happens is the borrower calls up the bank and says, "Listen, I got the following issues," right? And he explains the problem. Okay, and the lender says, "You're right, it's a very big problem, but because I'm ahead of you in the order of ownership in the event there's a default, it's my problem and not yours. I'd like to foreclose." And then the borrower says, "Well, have you not heard anything I've told you for the past 2 hours?" And he says, "Yes, I have, to pay your loan."
Right.
And he's like, "Well, I just told you I can't." He says, "What do you want me to do about it?" Right? So it becomes a situation where everyone could talk about their problems. The question is, what's the solution going to be? And can you suggest a solution that could fit both parties? And that's why, we use the line bridging the gap between the borrowers and the lenders. It's a nice little line, but it's very accurate. There's a gap. The lender looks at it from his perspective, and the borrower looks at it from his perspective, but they're really talking about the same property and have something very much in common. So that's what we do. We go in and refine a business plan that both could buy into.
So we're talking about the average real estate professional. How do they protect themselves from getting themselves into these potential situations where they're thinking about defaulting, or their loan is come up and it's past due or whatever like that?
I can answer that. They call Shlomo ahead of time.
Well, no, I think it happens way before that. I think it happens from the time you're looking to buy a property. I think the first thing is, when you buy a property, you got to buy it at the right price, and when you take a loan, you need to take the right loan. Sometimes it's better to some borrowers will say, "I want better leverage, so I come with less out of pocket." But the question is, what happens if? And let me tell you something, like Murphy said, if always happens. So they need to take a look at it and say, how am I going to make sure that this property will perform? And it starts, like I said, from day one, but it's also in the operating of the property. Real estate is not a commodity you put to sleep and wait for your leasing agent to call you with a new tenant. Real estate is something you got to work hard. Real estate is land, and it's not different than those who worked the land back in the day when you planted and you sowed and you reaped. It's just the way it is.
Right.
You need to constantly be on top of your property, make sure your property has the best position in its market. You got to make sure that there's something happening in the market, a tenant entering the market, that you fight very hard to get that tenant, and you fight very hard to keep your tenants, because long term, it will benefit you that way. Now, there are other issues. The issue is when you're taking a loan that your attorney doesn't really understand. When the loan docs are written and your attorney missed 5 things because he doesn't know the first thing about a CMBS loan. Or if you're headed if you're going through a decline and you talk to your attorney who's just interested in litigating, and he says, oh, we'll do this, we'll tie him up in court for this long, and they just want to have the stomach for it. I got news for all those that think that. The special servicer is paid to have the stomach to fight. They're not concerned about you dragging them into court. They're really not. And ultimately, no one wins in foreclosure. No borrowers win in foreclosure unless you're establishing case law. And that doesn't happen often. So long story short, you need good advisors. You need to work hard. And you need to make sure that you always have a competitive edge. And that's the only way to protect yourself from declining, because like I was told when I was young, you're either going up or going down, but you're never staying static.
That's all great information, Shlomo. And I'm hoping our listeners, they'll learn something from this, because this is important when you're a property owner.
Right.
If someone wanted to use your services, how would they get a hold of you?
Well, our website is www.caseps.com, CASEPS.com. Our phone number is 646-412-5888. And we're glad to do an assessment on the property. We have historical data on every single CMBS loan based on information that borrowers submit to the lender. So it's very easy for us quickly to take a look at not only the information on the property, but what the lender is seeing in the property, because the lender provides a commentary, a running commentary on their thoughts on the property. And we can also take a look and see what has happened in similar workouts and similar properties to a potential client's property. So they just got to give us a holler, and our team would be glad to talk. And I'll get involved. I get involved with every single potential client and review what goes out there and look for the angles. How can we position the business plan to make sense for both parties?
And Shlomo, before we get off air, what is your geographic coverage? Do you just do Manhattan? Do you do the 5 boroughs? Do you go out to Westchester, Long Island? What is your geographic coverage?
No, we've done deals in Florida. We've done deals in Southern California. We've done deals all over the country.
Oh, fantastic.
National, yeah.
That's great.
That's great.
We're actually going out now to the ICSC show in Vegas. We're going to be exhibiting there, and we're setting up meetings, yes.
Nice.
All right.
Nice.
Tell everyone you were on the New York Real Estate Journal.
And when you're in Boston, give us a call. We'll go out to lunch.
No, certainly, 100%.
Thank you for your time, Shlomo.
Thank you for coming on, Shlomo.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it. Bye.
Bye.
That was Shlomo Chopp. He was the managing partner of Case Property Services, LLC. And the show is brought to you today by the New York Real Estate Journal, bringing together the commercial real estate industry for over 25 years. Find us at NYREJ.com. If you'd like to be a guest or sponsor for the show, call 800-654-4993 or email us at radio@nyrej.com. Again, that's 800-654-4993 or email us at radio@nyrej.com.
You're listening to the UR Business Network. Broadcasting from Woburn, Mass.